Hello adventurers, my name is Chance, welcome to my Spellbook, and thank you so much for tuning in to the 4th episode of our Elven Subrace series. Today we're going to be going over another one of the Eladrin, namely the Spring Eladrin, if you can't tell already. Found in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, the Eladrin are elves that are native to the Feywild, a realm of beauty, unpredictable emotion, and boundless magic. An Eladrin is associated with one of the 4 seasons, and has coloration reminiscent of that season, which can also affect the Eladrin's mood. In Spring's case, it's described as being the season of cheerfulness and celebration, marked by merriment as winter's sorrow passes. Essentially, chaotic good is how it makes it out to be, just a good time. Now, before we move on to its mechanics and eventually its personal face step, I just want to say you're really going to want to check out the playlist in its entirety on this one. At the very least, the elf episode we did. Reason being, since we're only going over the subrace, it doesn't include all the perks you get just for being an elf in general. So do bear that in mind, and you can select the playlist by clicking on that little eye icon up top and then clicking on the playlist from there, or waiting until the end of the video and clicking on the playlist on one of the end screens. With that out of the way, let's now dive right into their mechanics. As per all of your Eladrin brothers, you get a +1 to Charisma, and you gain access to Face Step. As a bonus action, you can magically teleport 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. Once you use this trait, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. Essentially, it's just like Misty Step, only gussied up a little bit different, with the biggest difference being it's not a spell, it's just a racial ability. Because of that, a lot of things that would commonly thwart spells have no effect on you, because, once again, it's not a spell. In addition to that, you don't have to worry about petty and frivolous things like components, so if you're playing in a game where those really do matter, then you're really going to be in a great position here. And Misty Step, in general, is one of those spells that most casters take without hesitation. It's just borderline great, and Face Step, being based off of it, is certainly no exception to that rule. However, with every Eladrin, there is a variation on their Face Step, and let's get into the variation for the Spring Face Step. The Spring Eladrin is a little unique, and leads to some interesting opportunities as a result. Currently, we've already covered the Autumn Eladrin as well as the Winter, and both of their face steps are fairly comparable to one another. One imparts the charmed condition, and the other imparts the frightened condition. The spring is different altogether. So when you use your face step, you can touch one willing creature within 5 feet of you. That creature then teleports instead of you, appearing in an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you. This is really interesting, because depending on how you define the term willing, it can get really crazy. So there's like a little bit of background on this in particular. There's like this long-standing history of spellcasters tricking non-spellcasters by asking them like leading questions. For example, you run into a wizard in the middle of nowhere and you help him out, and he's like, "Hey man, listen, as thanks for you helping me out, how about I make you a magical animal?" Right? And they're like, "Oh, sweet, a magical familiar. No, that sounds great. I'd love one of those." And then they just cast polymorph on you and turn you into a rabbit and like proceed to just destroy you, you know? Like, there's always kind of been things like that in D&D, and maybe just in the fantasy trope in general. So you could use that same rationale when it applies to this, I suppose. So you could have a conversation with, like, I don't know, like someone that you're trying to, like, assassinate, for example. And let's say you're in an area with, like, I don't know, some kind of separate room, like a jail cell or just another room in general. And you walk up to them, put your hand on their shoulder, like kind of like a buddy would, and you're like, "Hey man, maybe we should check that jail cell later, or maybe we should like check out that room later. What do you say about that?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever, sure." And then wham, they're teleported 30 feet into that room or jail cell, and you lock the door, and you're like, "Sucks to suck, bro." Like, you could do stuff like that. I understand that that's not really the intended purpose of this face step, but it could be interesting. The intended purpose, if you haven't already figured out, is to treat it as more of a support-based ability. So if you have like a rogue, let's say, and they want to do sneak attack from a better vantage point, but they can't really get up to a certain area, then you use this face step on them, and they can teleport. That's kind of the way this is meant to be used. I suppose you could also use it to like help people escape from jail cells or rooms or whatever I mentioned earlier, through the same way. Now, seeing as how it's not a magical spell, it's a magical ability or a racial ability that just happens to be magical in nature, you can't use it with like distant spell or with the find familiar touch spell transfer gimmick. And that's kind of one of the bigger drawbacks to this. However, the plus side is it's not a magical spell. So if for whatever reason there's a ward or an area of anti-magic or just dead magic, you can still use this. That's going to be really beneficial. Verdicts out on how useful this is, I'd say it's relatively niche, maybe even more niche than the Winter Eladrin. However, yeah, let's get to my personal thoughts on it. The Spring Eladrin is interesting, for sure, and it lends itself to a certain playstyle, to say the least. To be fair, none of the Eladrin are what I would consider bad. Not by really a long shot, but some of them are certainly more useful than others. The Spring is kind of hard to peg in terms of like ranking them, just because its face step customization is not really directly comparable to any of them, and it just boils down to a circumstance by circumstance basis. That's why I was saying it was kind of niche. It's an interesting way to solve problems. For example, like you can avoid traps, straight up just teleport into vaults, stuff like that, or an ally into a vault, whatever. It doesn't really make a huge difference. So it is really neat for all that stuff. But relative to the Autumn Eladrin in particular, I still feel like Autumn's the most useful in just a general jack of all trades sense. However, man, if you get to use the Spring face step and you get to use it effectively, it's just going to make a cool story, almost guaranteed. Or it might turn into a new meta for your group. Who knows? When it comes to support-based abilities, it really does just come down to the group dynamic and party composition as a whole. So you might be able to get a ton of use out of it. You might be able to get next to no use out of it. It's just a niche ability. That being said, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. Let me know what you think down beneath in the comment section. Be sure to mention any thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns you may have regarding the Spring Eladrin, as well as any cooler stories and even ideas you have. That being said, if you'd like to get access to a free one-shot written by yours truly, feel free to do so by going over to the guild hall, use code WELCOME, and checking it out that way. And of course, please check out the playlist. Seriously, there's no way you're getting notified of all these. YouTube sends out 3 notifications a day. I'm producing more than 3 videos a day. On that logic alone, odds are you're never going to hear about all my videos. And if you really want to make the most informed choice, just check out the playlist. Easiest thing to do, hands down. They're pretty organized. I put a lot of time into them, so yeah, might as well enjoy them. That being said, I hope you all have a great day, and as always, a happy adventuring.